Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for one of our Fox sales coaching, sales training. We've been doing these now going on, Tom, how many months is it? What month are we in? Ninth?
I would say it's 8. This is month 8 since we started in February.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think you might have a birthday coming up here pretty soon.
Jim, we don't need to get into that. It's not important.
I think it's a big birthday too, if I'm not mistaken.
It's bigger than I'd like. It's bigger than I'd like.
Okay, well, listen, you don't look a day over 59. I mean, honestly, and I think that we would probably get universal agreement on that. At any rate, today's topic is sales coaching and leadership development. And we kid about this almost every time we do one of these, about this one being the most important. But I think for the people who have taken the time, effort, and resources to invest in Fox Selling System, the idea of developing your people is pretty top of mind. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, but I'd love to almost engage Rob out of the gate. I don't think many cultures necessarily would say developing people is at the forefront. It's something we all want to do, but it's like Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants of time management. Quadrant 2, which is consisting of activities that are important but not urgent. Important but not urgent is where training goes. And so most people don't have the discipline to live in quadrant 2. Therefore, it's one of those nice to have things that most companies don't do. Rob, agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, it's frustrating at times as a leader and a coach. You want to do it, and then we all, especially, even before COVID, get sidetracked, and then you don't have or find the time. You got to force it. And what I find is when you force it and you're able to engage and coach and lead, the growth of that individual you see immediately. And then that's the gratification. It's just the commitment, which is tough at times because we're getting Zoom requests, texts, emails, etc. that it just requires a commitment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The thing is I know you guys have probably watched television shows. Is anybody here a Game of Thrones fan? Was anyone? Remember how they would do the cold opening, or Saturday Night Live would do a cold opening? That's what you call what we just did. We did a cold opening. We jumped right into the topic without really even going through the introductions, but that's okay.
Norm Macdonald, RIP.
Yeah. So with us today, as you know, I'm Jim Kaleka. I've been working with Tom Fox. I've had the pleasure of working with him for over 10 years now. And we used him. I come from the distributor side of things and have had over 30 years experience working with distributors, suppliers, et cetera. And for the last 7 or so years that I was with the distributor, Tom was our exclusive sales training resource. And we were able to implement his process internally across 4 operations. And I can tell you, having the Fox Selling System would have been such a huge asset to have back then. I can't even imagine the progress we would have been able to make. So for those of you who are part of this system, you really do have a great advantage over other people, because if you look at what Rob mentioned, everybody wants to do it. We have difficult time finding the time to do it and committing to it. Well, if you have a system that's in place, essentially turnkey, that we have provided, it makes it easier for you to do it. Doesn't mean that all those other factors don't come into play with regards to the hindrances that might pop up for training. But if you are committed, we have a resource for you to be able to do that. So enough about that. I want to give an opportunity for Sean Fox, Tom's middle child. I think he came in 2nd place in one of the golf outings they played.
It's really good. I mean, nothing to be ashamed of.
No, nothing. 2nd is not bad. And I mean,
I just not play next year. I deal with this crap every single time.
Yeah. No, you got to win. And that's this is about developing people for performance. And I don't know what,
thickening your skin is one of the parts of developing.
Just got to spend more time in the range.
One way in which, Tom, you could help in my development is potentially adding 5 to 10 more days of PTO to my
that's going to happen.
Schedule, just so that way I can kind of get out and enjoy nature and hit a
I
white
didn't
ball.
know this was a negotiating course, but I like it.
Should be, not going to happen.
No, but I'm Sean Fox. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've been with Fox Sales Coaching as well as Fox Selling System for about 26 months now. Primary responsibilities are around account management and business development. Excited to be here this morning, and I'm actually kind of interesting timing doing a couple certifications out in the field over the next month or two with a supplier that Tom's been working with. So this topic is kind of perfect timing for me to not only be a participant, but then also kind of help facilitate. So excited to be here this morning.
And with that, I've said you don't need an introduction, but I think that it would be a disservice to the people that have joined and for the legacy that you've created, Tom, across the country. Tom Fox, the leading sales training and consultant, coach, key account management expert, and winner of the Fox Open for 2 years running now. Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share your insight, wisdom, and jokes with us.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's lonely at the top. Let me just say that out of the gate here. When you play a golf tournament with your two sons, you're on borrowed time. At some point, my skills will diminish. They are diminishing, and yet I'm still able to take the development that I have self-taught and have come out a winner. Now, with the Fox selling system, you don't have to be self-taught. We're providing a lot of support. All of our clients are taking advantage of that, and we're thrilled with that. So it is a pleasure to be here. This is an important topic for the main reason of, if you're at all energized at the vision of your company, at all energized, then this is not a nice to do, it's a need to do. And I wish more people looked at it that way. So when you look at in every vision statement I've seen, they tend to be very well written, and they're clear in the aspirational hurdles that they want people to achieve, which are never going to be easy. But if we buy into it, then the coaching around how do we get better at selling, and even the coaching we can do today with all of our managers, how do you get better at coaching? And I think, Rob, your opening comments about that gratification, there's nothing better than following a process in a way that drives like just enormous confidence and then ultimately success. So I have a new quote. It's actually different, I think, than the one I sent you and Sean this morning. Let's jump into the quote. Did you see this one?
No.
I did not.
Okay. So here's the deal. I mean, this is probably a dumb quote. I'm probably going to regret this, because you can't measure listening skills.
Oh, you can.
You can't measure features, like how many features and benefits someone would say. You
You
can't
can.
measure how to handle an objection.
I object to that premise.
We can't measure how people coach. Those are soft skills, and hopefully people get better. But guess what? The Fox selling system, we absolutely can measure. And I think that's, Jim, I thought this quote was highly apropos, because we can do things that the industry historically never was able, or never did, or really was probably even able to do.
Yeah, and I think that is probably a differentiator between this sales training and coaching and development system and other training programs that may focus on the skills, but they don't necessarily focus on the measurement of it and actually track and see how people are improving in those soft skill areas. And oftentimes people going to look for a promotion, those are what are lacking.
Right.
Those are the areas that companies will look at an individual and say, you know what, this person really, they struggle in this area, they struggle in that area, and it may be around these soft skills, which is exciting that we're able to address those things.
Rob, is it possible that a salesperson working for FIFCO, well-intended, hardworking, but with no development, might never get better at listening? And they do a decent job. They're hardworking and have, to a degree, large levels of success. But is it possible that they could go year by year by year and never improve on a number of different selling aspects without focused development?
It's possible, right? And that's, somebody that has been in the industry for a while, unwilling to adapt and change. My way has worked.
Yeah.
we all have to be open to self-improvement. We all have to be open to different ideas, especially what we just endured in the last 18 months.
Mhm.
It is about change. It is about adapting, and it's not just ourselves, it's to our customers. So in our instance, to our wholesalers and our retailers, you have to adapt and you have to improve and you have to measure, because that's how you're going to show the growth of your improvement. So yeah, Tom, you don't have to, and you can be stagnant and then wonder why maybe you're getting passed up on a promotion or
Right.
the results are suffering. Or you take the other approach of, wow, I really need to and want to step it up.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think that was spot on. I mean, if you look at what we're providing our clients with the scorecard app, they have an opportunity to measure listening skills, presenting skills, handling and objections, preparing, among other things. But if we were to observe someone 100 times, so that's not even 10 a month. So not even 10 calls a month. And let's say it's 50 times. So it's not even 5 calls a month, but over 50 times, if you had a chance to have a conversation based on the scoring 50 times, what is that going to say to that employee about how important this is? Would I talk about something 50 times if it wasn't important? No. And then if we are able to coach and observe and identify gaps from where they are to where they need to be, what is likely going to happen to their improvement? I mean, it's going to be significant. So, Jim, this might be a keeper. This quote might be a keeper.
I think it is, Tom. And I would just add to that is there's a definite link between that coaching in knowing what you're seeing and understanding it. So if the person that is doing the observation, they know it when they see it, or they know it when they hear it, that is the key. So for those people who are attending this or they're watching it later on, you really do have a higher obligation within your organization to make sure that you do understand the process and that you're able to communicate it and recognize when it's nuanced in some cases. But if you at least commit to understanding the process and following what the scorecard is actually saying, then you will get there. But you won't get there if you just do it one time or if you just do it 2 times. So,
no. Sean, any thoughts on that?
Well, it almost just reminds me of not only SMART goals, but goals in general. Like if you don't, there's always that, notion of if goals are more easily accomplished if they're written down. So what gets measured gets improved. If you're not writing stuff down, if you're not tracking progress, measuring against whether it's KPIs or just standard, hey, I want to go from here to here. Where am I at in that journey? This quote really reminds me of writing down goals that help you accomplish them.
Yeah, no, cool. All right, so here's the schedule. And again, for those of you who are jumping in via archive, it would be important to point out this is not going to be 4 hours. We have taken the feedback that has been given by many of our valued clients on the idea that these can be very valuable, but not necessarily in the 3 to 4 hour range. We've heard that feedback. We have edited and even upgraded the content, and yet have shortened it considerably, which I think you'll find to be a probably more effective way for you to use your time relative to development. So just for whatever it's worth, if you jumped in going, hey, I've got 4 hours. Now you can, if it's a Saturday, you can shoot out and watch the game. And all the while your family might still think you're in training. So kind of a win-win.
yeah. I mean, even going in and watching them afterwards might scare people away if they're thinking that they have to
it'd be awfully long. Yeah. Okay. So when we think about developing people, just how frequently and what kinds of occasions do we have available for developing people? Well, if you look at the Fox selling system, obviously we've got e-learning modules. People can learn by taking the modules, getting educated, going through the exercises, and then going back to those anytime you need to, based on the need for a refresher or another exposure. These live trainings here are, again, we're really proud of these. And we think that, and the feedback we've got has been the people who have attended either live or via archive have gotten a lot out of it, which is great. The on-the-job OTJ is arguably maybe the most available to everyone that, you're probably wanting to work with your teams once a month, if that's possible. And using the scorecard app can be what that whole initial quote from, from who was that? Was that
Drucker.
Peter Drucker, I think. Yeah. So, that whole quote came from, hey, what we measure, and we can measure with the on-the-job scorecard. And I can't think of a better way to develop people, quite frankly, by coaching and having them coach themselves based on your ability to navigate goals and rise our coaching process. The skills quotient, again, is another way to think about where you're at. Again, highly developmental. The sell sheet generator can be a great way to practice rehearsing, and even some of the micro meetings that we have on all these topics that you can facilitate at your convenience with all the speaker notes and ways we can get your teams engaged. You look at these 6 things, and I'm thinking to myself, these are wonderful ways to support the team, to get better. And that's the whole idea. So anyway, all right, now we're not going to launch the poll, Sean, but if we did launch the poll, does anyone have any idea what these 3 pillars are? I'll just go through it. I'll go through. Integrity. Pillar, yes or no?
No.
No. Excellence. Vision.
They're not bad things, but no.
Not bad. Vision. How about relationships?
No.
It's important, but not a pillar of leadership. How about developing people?
Yes.
How about results?
Yes.
Yes. So those are the 3. And again, I only talk about vision because I go back to that objective slide that we put in there. And we know that without the vision of the company, so let's just say we're trying to be our customer's #1 choice. Well, that's a pretty high bar, and it's likely going to need development. Okay. And the development is going to go right into mission. So what do we want people to be able to do in order to achieve our vision? Well, we want them to be not relationship selling. We want them to be value-based, empathy-based selling. So those behaviors that we can execute based on our mission statement, things like exceed expectations, be a partner,
World class,
creative, whatever that's going to look like in terms of helping the customer. And then with regard to the core values, again, are always in lockstep with that company vision. And then it's important when you think about the vision, not only within our coaching process, but even just this overarching idea of have they bought in? And I'm not going to talk about empathy very long today, but the idea of empathy, which means I'm just curious. Like, one of the things, Rob, we've gotten really good at, you were jumping into the Fox selling system back in the spring. We've done 75 demos since then. Our curiosity around the client seeing the various features of our Fox selling system, there has become, I think, Jim and Sean, a natural curiosity to see, hey, what do you think of this? Which is empathy, and even the idea of trying to change someone's attitude, this idea of getting them to think about it as a means of changing their attitude has to be driven from empathy, because it's like, hey, we just talked about listening skills. I want to get your take on it. I want to get your opinion on it. Because when people can think about it, they're likely going to think the way any reasonable person would think and probably buy in. The problem is if we don't ask our teams to think and to get their opinion based on empathy, then people can kind of go through the motions. And I think too many things can be subconscious. And we want development to be highly conscious. I hope that makes sense, because the more it's conscious, the more we can tie it back to the vision, which is always going to answer the question, why are we doing this? Why are you working with me today? Why are you coaching me? We're chasing our vision of being the customer's #1 choice. That's why we're doing it. I'm doing this work. I'm doing some work with a small little craft brewer, and their sales manager is just hasn't managed people before. So we're going through a lot of these little fundamentals, and this company doesn't even have a vision. And I just said, hey, for you, what vision do you have? If I went to one of your wholesalers, if I went to one of your retailers and I asked, so, hey, what about this company? What would you want them to say? And he said, I mean, it didn't bat an eye. He goes, I'd want them to say, we have a great team. I said, great, that's fine. Great team. We can run with that. Who wouldn't want to be part of a great team?
Mhm.
And do we know what a good teammate looks like versus a bad teammate?
Sure.
We know what that looks like. We know the difference. So why would someone not buy into that? Well, if they don't think about it much, they might not, consciously not buy in, but we don't want that. We want them to consciously buy in. So empathy is really a way to get them to think about it. And then this notion of not tolerating anything less. And every one of you has a decision to make in terms of how militant you want your culture to be. We think about this idea of like, okay, what should we tolerate? What shouldn't we tolerate? Well, anything that is contrary to our vision, you'd have to explain to me why we would tolerate. And I say tolerate, that doesn't mean we fire someone. It just means we coach someone against it. And again, and the reason why we're coaching them is to say, hey, listen, how is what you just did tie back to our vision? Question mark. I want them to think about that. If they think about it, what are they likely going to say? Yeah, no, you're right. That doesn't jive with the vision. So you can see why I brought it up. What's that, Jim?
They can't say that if you don't have one, for starters.
No, right. If you don't ask, yeah. And I think, Jim, and Sean, I think the vision of a company makes the conversations that are never easy to have. A lot of coaching conversations are never easy. But if we can always tie it back to something bigger than us, it's not me versus you. It's I'm chasing the vision of the company. I want you to chase it with me. And right now, what I just observed doesn't seem to be in lockstep. Let's talk about it. I'm not getting emotional. I'm not getting confrontational. Sean can probably attest. When he got grounded, I never raised my voice. Sean,
No.
I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed.
Pure disappointment.
Tom, I actually think that this is one of the greatest slides in the decks that you've presented, since I've known you. And the irony of this in terms of the obstacle, the wall this creates within an organization in terms of attaining a vision is unbelievable. I mean, when you think of how ownerships have tolerated mid-level managers' behaviors that are inconsistent with their own values. Maybe they're just out of touch. They're not in tune with their management team or whatever the reason might be. And when you talk about vision, you've done vision mission training for many organizations, right? And almost all companies' visions include something about their employees.
Yeah.
Most do. We want the best employees. So what better, hat rack to hang your hat on than, hey, part of our vision is we want our employees to be the best. Yeah. And this behavior is not consistent with that. Even if it's like, hey, we want to be, a world-class organization, maybe an individual might not be able to relate to what a world-class organization looks like, but they should be able to relate to, we want the best and highest performing individuals within our organization. They should be able to handle that.
Thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to build. I had the opportunity to go through an Aubrey Daniels course, and it is about, behavior management. And to what you're alluding to here is, it's not just the behavior of the leaders or the behavior that you exhibit or observe. It's reinforcing the positive behaviors that support your vision and support your culture. So
be great. That'd be great coaching. Yep.
And everyone's got, issues at times that, you want to correct. But if you reinforce the positive, more than likely that then becomes habit, as opposed to always feeling, I got to knock down this person because of, they had a bad day, or, out in the marketplace, they have constant out of stocks. Remind them then of the good accounts where they are in stock, and how did they do that? It will carry over, and it becomes then, just instinctual after a while. But it's reinforcing the positive behaviors versus always the negative. And we dwell to the negative, but I just wanted to build on that, Tom.
I love that, Rob. Rob, I have a question for you. How do you think there are a lot of companies, distributors and suppliers, that maybe don't have a published sales process or like a defined process? Do you think there are some distributors and suppliers that basically have not guided their team and given them any direction. It's like, these are the steps you should follow.
Are there? Sure. And I think you would then have to go back and dust off something that exists that
Right. It could be in a play. Yeah. It could be in a worker
say,
handbook or some.
Yeah, that's company policy. I had to look back 2 years ago, and yes, we do have that as policy. It just hasn't been brought to the forefront. So yeah, it does exist, and it's just a reminder of us as leaders within our companies and distributors of what that is. And like you said, it's about the bigger picture and how we can contribute to the bigger picture.
Totally. Yeah. So here's this is an opinion, but I really believe this. So I think a lot of good companies, distributors and suppliers alike, don't have a defined process. And if they do, it could be somewhere in some playbook hidden away. And it's not what I would call cultural, meaning that's just, we expect everyone to follow that process. Number two, even if they do have a process, how many companies are spending like tons of energy, effort, maybe even resources on developing their people against that process? Now, if there were a lot of companies that had a process, now we're looking at even fewer that would say, yeah, we have a lot of energy against our process. We train our people, we coach our people. It's really cultural. So I don't believe that that's very many companies. So what does that mean? In my opinion, it means that the industry, many companies in the industry tolerate relationship selling. And why would a company, like, if you really had any energy on your vision and mission, why would you tolerate relationship selling? So anyway, enough about that. Now, Rob, I do have another, I'm wondering if you've ever seen this next slide. Have you seen this?
Not in this detail.
Okay. Anyway, so we want to give this, just again, thinking of culture. I would imagine most reasonable people would look at this slide and go, yeah, we would want our culture to be above the line. This idea of having, a proactive, positive, solution oriented, own it, accountable, versus the whiny, blame game, deny, excuse, negative. And yet, here's why I show this. We're all human. Jim, if you looked at, Fox Sales Coaching, Learning Evolution, we're made up of human. These companies are made up of human beings. So there's times where we're below the line. We're human. But, and Rob, I'm only sharing this, and I'm thinking a lot of companies, frankly, have an opportunity culturally to, even if you use this exact verbiage. When I worked at Miller Brain Company, I had a boss, a guy named Bill Drager, who, when he came into our market area in the Mid-Atlantic, I was living in Richmond. He was someone that we knew, but none of us worked for him. And day one of his tenure in this, as the GM of this market area, he brings everyone in. We have a 2-day staff meeting. The first thing he does is some iteration of this slide. And from that day forward, whenever anyone in the market area interacted and they were doing things in a below the line way, it was called out with that exact verbiage. I think that's a little below the line. And you could even say it to our GM. You could say it to Bill, and Bill would own it. And it was the only time and it was probably the best culture. And I would say my own development flourished in this environment. And I just thought that, boy, if other companies could latch onto this, it doesn't take long for someone, when they think about whatever they did or thought, to say, is that below the line? Is that above the line? And then, Rob, to your point, when we're seeing gobs and gobs and gobs of above the line activities, praise the heck out of it. Pray, hey, listen, all that, what you're doing, not only is it above the line, it's helping us with where we're trying to go with our vision. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of important. Again, we've talked about empathy. I'm not going to necessarily get into that. But when you think about developing people, we have a process. So we talked about a process. Our profits process is something that we're proud to say a lot of companies have used. And so within the process, there are a number of skills that you would want to have people be good at that might require some development. Things like analysis during our prep, things like observation skills that we could do in recon, listening skills we could do with our ongoing confirmation, presenting, verbal presentation skills in the flawless piece, confidence, because we know an objection's coming and we can handle it with empathy. another skill, if you will. And then this ability to close. So all of these steps are not revolutionary. They're not, I would say they're not innovative. I would also say that step 3, while maybe it's not innovative, I think the way we emphasize empathy and listening is maybe greater than other companies who train people and have processes that I don't know how much that's emphasized. We know it's the cornerstone. So that's a process we'd want to develop people in. And then even on the coaching side, again, just to reiterate, our process for the pre-call conversation, focuses on, these questions that you can ask. And think about how developmental this could be. The first step, people have been doing that for generations. We've always asked. And I worked at a beer distributor, so that's 35 years ago. And, like when you're my age, Jim, that's 30, that's how long it is, 35 years ago.
I didn't want to say when I
He's not even 35 years old.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. That's great. But that company, my boss, when he worked with me in 1984, when I got out of college, what are we trying to get accomplished here, Fox? What's your goal? So people have been asking that for generations. Second question, third question, never asked to me one time. Hey, what is this person looking for? What is their need? Never once did a boss ever ask me that. Think about how developmental that. If we ask someone 50 times before we walk in, what's their need? Again, it goes back to things that we can score, right? All of a sudden, they're going to go, oh my God, this needs thing. Stauffer really seems to be a freak about this needs thing. I better get good at this because I want to be able to answer him when next time he comes working with me. I better have an answer. And you can't make it up, because if you make it up, it's likely going to get exposed that you didn't know it, and that would be way below the line, if you will. And then the next one, again, I bet there are some managers that would go, this would be the last thing I would do. If we knew the need of the customer. Okay, let's think of where we're at in the coaching process. First thing is, you told me, what's our goal? We're going to sell blue light seltzer, the variety pack. That's what we're going to sell today. Okay. What's the need of the customer? It's profitability. This, Swanson's all about profit. That's all Swanson cares about is profit, profit, profit. Okay. Third step. When you sell it into Swanson, knowing that their need is profit, what are some of the things you might mention? It's not a role play. It's maybe a rehearsal. Well, I would talk about how our seltzer, while it's $1 higher than some of the other seltzers out there, they're going to earn, an extra 17% profit. And knowing how important that is, that's an extra 80 cents a unit. In our forecast, you're going to sell 20 of these. You're looking at an extra $16 a week of profit. You mentioned how important that was. If I heard that, I'd be going, you're ready. You are ready. Versus someone who is going to go, I'll wing it. I got this. Then we go in there and it's like, blah, 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 blah. No coordination, no confidence, no poise. Why? Because us as a coach didn't get them prepared. Rob, I would ask you, Rob, you've been in the business a long time. Has any boss ever said to you before you walked in, and the answer might be yes, because you've worked for good companies, but were they ever said to you, okay, let's hear the pitch? And was it often, or was that more rare?
It was rare, based on kind of that leader and how they go to market and their beliefs and the process and the vision. It's something we definitely in the industry need to sharpen our pencils on. I think the one that's really drawn to me on this, Tom, is the ongoing customer need, because especially lately, it is so different. Some folks are just screaming for traffic that was never a problem before.
Right.
Because during pandemic, everyone went to big box stores. It was a one-stop shop. I get in, I get out, and I don't have to go back out again for another 7 to 10 days. Things have opened up now, but some folks, it's not always about profit. They want that,
right,
that foot traffic to sell lottery tickets, to sell other things. And it's not always profit. And just if you assume their needs, you're going to be wrong more than I think you're going to be right, especially lately with just the dynamic of folks. There's many accounts that have closed on and off premise. So I think needs are different, and I think you have to adapt, to your point, those needs to be successful in selling. And everyone is different. It's not, where you can spread it like you used to years ago, peanut butter, and just like, it's all about profit.
Right.
It is
No, I think
different.
you're right.
Every account.
I think you're right. And again, you go back to that initial quote, what we measure, we can improve. Again, Jim, you saw it happen.
Yeah.
When you were doing work with the distributor you worked for, you had to see meteoric development because of what you measured and how many conversations you had and getting the managers energized to coach. You saw it.
Yeah. I mean, it's all tied in, if they have the buy-in, then they're excited about it. If they haven't bought in, then what you see is either just some kind of reciting the process as opposed to owning it, believing it, and that coming through. I mean, we've talked about Kenny, as the prime example of somebody who just was so raw, didn't have anything else in terms of exposure to any type of sales training, so didn't know anything different. He would literally say the words verbatim, but it was coming out of his mouth, his way, and he had huge success. He's a supervisor now, but then we had people who would scoff at it. Oh, I don't need it. I have good relationships with my customers. So I think that at the end of the day, when you think of so many of the things we've talked about on each of the slides, and the team and the rehearsing and the repetition and coaching, all that, it is so applicable in the sporting world. It's where we learn it, right? It's the thing that we can probably relate to the most. And yet we don't apply those same techniques and philosophies and principles in our work environment. I don't understand it sometimes, really.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, you look at how, and again, I realize these coaches are making millions, but they're professionals, right? And they are scheming. What does scheming mean? Scheming means they're figuring out the process to win. And again, there's a lot of moving parts with, 22 individuals on a field. It's a little different than one person selling, but it just begs the question that if it's that much more simple in our industry, why wouldn't people be better at it?
Well,
anyway, all right. So then the last, what's that, Jimmy?
I don't know. I mean, I think
it's a lack of leadership. I think it's a lack of leadership.
That's it.
I mean, I think our industry is chock full of great people, but the leadership component, which again, what are the three pillars? First one, vision. And how many companies talk about their vision as frequently as we would say they should? Not many. Because if you talk about it a lot, then you've inspired the organization to achieve at a level they're not going to be anywhere near capable of if we don't go to the second pillar, which is developing people. So anyway, fourth one there, I think a lot of people have asked historically, what's Swanson typically object to? What's their objections? We've asked that. So G and L, I believe, have been around forever. O and A, not so much. And then the idea that when we develop people, if we can do these little, what we call bite-sized nuggets of coaching, probably easier to swallow a nugget of chicken than the whole chicken. So because that actually made sense, didn't it?
Kind of.
If you took a chicken nugget, you could eat the nugget, you couldn't eat the whole chicken. And if you try to coach the entire process, that's like having your rep eat an entire chicken. Okay. I think that'd be a lot to do, Sean.
All right.
Sean's like, he's derailed.
Yeah.
I'm quite lost here.
I think it's your bull.
We get we get
a good look at a T-bone.
Yeah. So I do feel like the bite-sized nuggets of coaching are more manageable. Who wants to be overcoached? There's nothing worse than being overcoached. Someone is nitpicking everything, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Now, after the call, arguably as important, I don't minimize the importance of this. I don't think it's more important than this, but now we can observe, all of their efforts, and now we can come back and start at the top. People have been asking this questions since day one. I mean, whenever the industry started, prohibition, did we get accomplished what we wanted to get accomplished? We've been asking that forever. I do think the I and the S steps are not cultural in most organizations. If there is any coaching, Most of the coaching was, all right, Swanson, you suck at this, you suck at this. I thought you did that pretty well. That feedback makes sense. Okay, good. Let's go to the next stop. One way, top down. We want to do the exact opposite. We want to get their impressions. An empathy-based coaching approach. We want your opinion. Mr. or Mrs. Sales Rep, we want your opinion. What did you think of the call? And of course, they're going to be vague. I was okay. Didn't really go really well. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that incredible detail. I know everything I need to know now. Thank you. And good luck on the next stop. Would not be, we would probe. It didn't go well. What do you mean? Could have been better. What do you mean? Tell me more. Elaborate, please. Because what do we want them to do? We want them thinking. The more they can think about that sales call they just had, if we saw things that we want them to do again and again and again because it was really exemplary, well, we want them to come up with it first and then go, boy, that was spot on. I was hoping you'd come up with that. You nailed that. That'll reinforce that behavior. They'll do it again. Areas where there's gaps, where they weren't performing or using the selling behaviors that we would want. Again, way more important for them to come up with it. Yeah, I don't think I asked the right questions. Oh, if you could do it over again, now we're on the S step. If you could do it over again, what questions would you ask? Because what's the whole idea of coaching? It's to influence attitudes and behaviors. Okay, so let's start with behavior. When we ask for their impressions, we're getting inside their head. And if they said, I don't think I asked the right questions. And if you notice that too, geez, he or she asked horrible questions. Now we want to correct that behavior. We want to influence that behavior. So if you could do it again, what would you say differently? What questions would you ask? I could tell them what questions to ask. That's not the coaching we're looking for. We want them to come up with it. Because if they can come up with it, then they thought of it, it'll be a much more effective coaching scenario versus me just, top down. You should have asked this, and this. We just don't think that would be at all effective, right, Jim?
Correct. And unless they say, well, I'm really not sure. That's where I struggle. In which case, then you can offer some suggestions and how they might improve.
Well, what you could say would be, okay, listen, I heard you ask this question. Do you think that was a good one? If what question could you ask differently? Do you remember asking that one? I want to make sure that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So the impressions drive these, like either, hey, I did this really well. We're going to reinforce that. We're going to celebrate that. The impressions that identified gaps, areas where there's opportunities to improve, we're going to correct that behavior in the S step. And then we get inside their head at the end. We kind of wrap it up in this empathic bow by asking them, all right, overall, what do you think of the whole profits process? Can you see how it ties back to our company vision of, can you see if we get really good at this, how it ties back to being our customer's number one choice? Does that make sense to you? Question mark.
Hey, Tom, you mentioned nuggets earlier, and I think that the same thing can be said at the end, not necessarily asking, can you see how the whole process works? But if you are looking at, breaking down whether it's the transition statement or the bridging features to benefits, et cetera, you can ask the same question for buy-in. Can you see how that would have helped you?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be, because I think that there are often times when I've, at least from my own experience in doing ride with some coaching, where people, they did buy in. I mean, they liked it but they needed to improve in certain areas. So getting them to understand and buy into a specific technique is equally important. I mean, at the end of the day, if they don't buy into the process, you probably have a pretty good idea from, stop one.
Yeah, if they're defensive every time you're talking to them, that's going to be a red flag.
Yeah. But I would say that conversation at the end of the day doesn't necessarily have to be, can you see how and I'm not trying to oppose what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. You have to have that empathic check-in. But I have had, if you ask it at the first stop and you believe it and they confirm that they do buy into it, and then you're asking the same question at the third stop and the fourth stop, I think you can start getting into the nuggets, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, Jim, it's reinforced that behavior, right? You saw them do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Remind them how great it was. That builds confidence too.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. And that's what we're trying. If someone's confident, genuinely, authentically confident, I mean, we have an unstoppable salesperson.
Right.
But what would make someone confident? Prepared? Someone who's practiced? And I really think it comes down to this overarching thing. It's like they know they can help.
Mhm.
If you knew you could help, if you knew your suggestions could provide productivity for that account, if you really believe that, you're going to be so much more effective than someone who's, because again, we know the research. What happens when 90% of all sales calls get an objection?
Mhm.
90%. And 60% of the time in that 90% bucket, 60% of the time, the salesperson just retreats. What does that say about their confidence? It says they weren't confident. All right. So, Jim, I'm going to have you and Sean kind of comment on these next few slides, speaking to different components of FSS. So I'll let you guys kind of, handle this in terms of, and I want you to focus on development. Like, so how could this be developmental? Sean, do you have any thoughts? I'm kind of shocking them here, Rob. I'm putting them out there. I'm testing them to see how they can, on the fly, manage this. What do you think, Sean?
The skills assessment, and Jim, stop me at any point, but the skills assessment, the reason we created this is to be able to try to, for two reasons. A, create individualized training tracks and training opportunities, either in work with our teams, or specifically in the platform where we could then prescribe either any of the e-learning modules. So if someone, thinks that they're a 1 or a 2 on that Likert scale that we've defined within these skills assessments for data interpretation or handling objections or ongoing confirmation, and then the manager potentially agrees of, hey, there's room for improvement here, this is an opportunity to develop, we could then prescribe any of these specific e-learning modules, even if the person's completed the course of, hey, let's go back, let's retake that module over the next 2 weeks, and then our next one-on-one before, October 1st, let's walk through some of the concepts and ensure that we're grasping this, and then check in, is this something you can see yourself doing next time we ride together? Or any of the live training topics, because we've got all of these different topics that you can see on the screen. We've got live training similar to today on handling objections, on trade math, on fact-based selling stories. So there's a myriad of ways where we can take advantage of this skills assessment. So that's one of the ways in creating individualized training tracks. But the other one is to have more objective career path, performance discussion conversations instead of subjective conversations where a manager might say, hey, I think we need to get better at handling objections, or we need to get better at, maybe not necessarily closing the sale, but surveying for opportunities or preparing for the sales call. When we take the skills assessment, we can, assess ourselves, our manager assesses us, and then match those two together to create more objective conversations for development. Instead of it being subjective of the managers saying, hey, subjectively, I think we could get better at this or that, based on the definitions of each of these skills that we've outlined within the skills assessment, it allows us to create those individualized training tracks as well as have more objective coaching conversations to develop our teams.
Rob, were you able to get, I know you got to jump off in a few minutes, but were you able to get through this? I mean, there's so many different features within FSS. Not everyone does everything, but were you able to do this with your team?
Yep. Everyone.
How'd that go?
It was good. We weren't off by much. And I think, that's, knowing your people knowing themselves and being honest about the assessment. And, where we were off, it was, similar to the model you're showing. It was a point. We didn't have anyone, giving themselves a 3 and their manager giving them a 1. It was fairly consistent. And I would say, there are some buckets, the empathy, as you've discussed, is one that, maybe someone scored themselves high, manager low. But some of the other ones were fairly consistent. I honestly expected maybe a little more variant than we saw, but it was pretty close because I think, managers for the most part, know their people well enough. For those that have been with the company for a while, some of the newer people, you're going to have some disparity, but in general, it was a great exercise and there wasn't that much variant, but this clearly defines it, getting to what Sean was alluding to is it defines it quickly as opposed to, you kind of guess it.
Yeah, I like that. And I also, Sean, what you said, I think is really critical in that those gaps allow us to then prescribe how do we get better at that? Do we take e-learning? Do we do more coaching, whether it's one-on-one on the job or even, hey, watch one of the webinars. There'd be a lot of ways to solve it. But anyway, Jim, want to
Yeah.
get your take on the next one.
Well, hang on. I think there's an important one on the previous one, and that has to do with because I think Sean did a perfect explanation of the application of it. There's a 10,000 foot application that applies to this as well, and that is that doing the skills assessment throughout your organization will give you a benchmark. It communicates to the organization what the expectations are. So from an organization, your skill assessment quotient should be at a certain level, and that's what you aspire to be at. It's like where the vision comes in. And so I think that part of it is critical. There needs to be buy-in at the top that this is what the expectations are.
Yeah, no, good point. I'll let you kind of take the coaching scorecard, Jim. And again, we've kind of already talked about this. And I do want to get your take on this, Rob. I know you're jumping here in a minute, but and I'm not sure how much of this you've been able to do with COVID and the ability for people to kind of work together. But in my opinion, this, the topic of today's webinar is development. I mean, I think this one is massive opportunities to really engage in the coaching and then build up those skills. Any thoughts, Rob?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Rob's got to jump in a minute, so I want to make sure I give him a chance.
To this, Tom, it pinpoints, and that's the challenges lately. Supplier, distributors is time. We're all crunched on time. We're missing some folks. We're trying to make up, and you don't have a lot of time to focus on everything. You immediately want to jump to what's wrong and fix it. You hear it on Sundays, especially the college coaches. Yeah, we're going to clean it up.
Yeah.
What are they going to clean up? They're going to clean up what went wrong, but are they going back and reinforcing the good things they did? No, they're jumping right to what needs to be. And this kind of helps identify that. Our organization, June, July, August, we were really focused on sales and trying to get to street. We're re-engaging in, the sales training aspect, but this helps really focus to those individuals who say, look, I have no time in the next 3 weeks. All right, but you do have 20 minutes, and let's focus on this. And then we can see it via scorecard in the measurement and just jump in it. Now it feels funky because you're going out of sequence, but if that's what you need to focus on, that's what you work on. And then you can go back and brush up on the other things as time permits, whenever that's going to be, right?
Yeah. Rob, I got one last question for you, and it's kind of going back to what you said, but the idea of a sports team looking at the tape, I think you'd have to agree with me when you look at the Michigan coaches, what could they really coach? These last two games, they've played, frankly, flawlessly. And I think you'd have to agree with me. I want you to kind of join with me when I ask you to say they really couldn't have played any better. And you'd have to say you're impressed. You'd have to agree with me, right, on that?
It was run left, run right, don't fumble, it was boring, but yes, they won, Tom. So there's not much to clean up.
I would argue.
Yeah, it goes for green too, pal.
Yeah.
Your green's looking awfully good. I frankly, if I can get 7 points, I'm taking Sparty all day Saturday.
Well, here's the thing though on that their scorecard had to have included something about the passing game. And so if it didn't include anything about the passing game, then it's fixed.
You heard Harbaugh address that. He said,
yeah,
well, George Patton, he won his battles on the ground, and Neil Armstrong did his in the air. So I'm okay with George. Yeah. So Rob is right. Pinpointing. And Rob also, and we even talk about that in the process, so that if you are going to just pinpoint that, so it doesn't throw your numbers off. If you just NA all of those other things, then the quotient score you're going to get on that behavior or those couple behaviors is going to be accurate. Yeah, Tom, I think that this is where the skill assessment measures what they understand to be the process. This measures whether or not they can actually put it into practice. It's the behavior. Does the behavior match what they say or understand the process to be? The other thing too, and this is something I told Sean, every 10 years or so, I accidentally stumble upon a good idea. And yesterday I did. And I think, and Rob, you're the first, you're going to be, along with Tom, the first to hear this. And that is, we haven't really discussed how you can use the scorecard and the sell sheet in tandem and doing role-playing rehearsal.
you don't have to necessarily be out in the market with riding with a rep. You can
True.
go through this. You can do it virtually. They can give their pitch, and you can use the scorecard application to actually measure. And I think that that is a good way to build skills before they go into the market. What do you think? Is that brilliant?
Brilliant.
Pretty brilliant, isn't it?
I like it, Jim.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's all. I need positive reinforcement.
You are on the,
That's what I'm doing.
on the spot there, on the money,
Yeah.
top dog.
All right. Well,
But Jim, I would ask you, you've worked for three different leadership teams within your
Right.
3 different distributors. You know, one was bought out.
mhm.
Before you started riding with, you know, you were managing the development for all 4 operations. Prior to that, would you say that there was ever a scenario that in not only the companies you work for, but even those that you knew that were peers of yours within the state, even out of state, how many measured things that FSS is measured? How many people like would say, you know, when we evaluate someone, we're going to give you a listening score. We're going to give you, I mean, how many did that?
Zero.
Zero.
I mean, I can remember being exposed years and years ago to a curbside chat. You know, that idea. I think it was with Gallup. I think that was the first time when I took over the beverage side of our distributorship at Flint and was responsible for the wine and non-beer items. We were a Gallup distributor, and so I went through their training, and they were big on the curbside chat, and it was a pre and a post. It was similar. It didn't have rise. I mean, it wasn't tell me your impressions. It was not empathetic at all. But it was, in fact, a curbside chat. So I had that, but measure it. You know, you might have written it down in a recap, but then who's going to see that?
Well,
Maybe-
and it
maybe
just goes to
one person.
show you that most all of the evaluation was simply based on results,
Yeah.
which is, it should be part of it.
Yeah.
But to not include other things, anyway. All right, fellas, let's keep going. So let's talk about this notion of tracking, evaluating, reporting. So Sean, you want to take this one?
I mean, at its core, what a learning management system is, which is what the Fox selling system is, a beverage, alcohol, or really beverage specific learning management system, is a digital way of administering content. So whether it's training courses, whether it's the productivity tools that we have, like Tom showed in the skills assessment, the scorecards for the digitized ride with aggregation tool, or the sell sheet generator, alongside the live training and e-learning modules, a learning management system is a way to administer digital training and content, but everything within it can also be tracked, measured, and reported on. So in this instance here, what Tom is looking at, this is our reporting dashboards where we can visualize. You can see the time filters there. So in this instance, it shows a start date of 10/14/20 through January 13, 2021. So over time, customers can track as we're using the scorecards and, you know, giving the opportunity and investing in the team for development, tracking a lot of that progress. So how many modules has the team completed? How many live trainings have they attended? How many scorecards have I conducted or, you know, marked while observing behaviors out in the field? How many sell sheets have they created? Are those sell sheets focused on increasing sales, profit, traffic? You know, watching those trends and then being able to compare over time. So Q1 versus Q2 or 2020 versus 2021. That's the power of this system, to be able to track and measure. Are we seeing progress? If so, where? If so, not, and where are we, you know, do we still need to see development from either certain teams or certain individuals? But being able to track that and show progress is really the power of what a learning management system is.
Well put, Sean. I mean, that really says it in a nutshell. And Tom, you know, earlier you were being facetious when you said, you know, you can't measure listening skills. You can't measure how many times somebody uses features and benefits and links them. And that is, it's so untrue. But I don't, again, you know, I think one of the reasons, and I don't want this to sound like we're patting ourselves on the back, but when we were designing this, we tried to think of all of the things that were real world application of the selling process and tracking and measuring. And there wasn't anything like that. That's not to say they weren't learning management systems. They exist all over the place, but not one.
Did we lose him? Shawnee, can you hear me?
I'm still here. Yeah, Jim may have frozen.
Okay, well, we can jump in here as Jim's in this action pose there.
Level that an employee gets out
Hey,
of.
he's back. He's back.
Yeah, Jim,
Was
you
I
cut
gone?
out for like 20
We
seconds.
lost you.
Oh, sorry.
We were giving your eulogy.
Well, all I'm going to say is
He was such a great guy.
that
I
when
really liked him a lot. I really did.
he was really short, but you know what? He made the most of it.
Remember that in Groundhog? Remember that in Groundhog Day? The cameraman when they go to the medical, they go to the who is the MD? They call it anyway, the person who handles all the dead bodies and
The examiner,
What's
medical examiner.
ME, the medical exam, yeah. And they open up the cover and you see Bill Murray's face. He's like, he was a great guy. And he hated the guy. He's like, I really liked him a lot.
That's what you're comparing this to? It's my stomach turn. All right. Well, listen,
Anyway,
get back to this, the
But so
scorecard.
in addition, so we lost a little bit of what you said, but I think what you were saying was this idea that we can score, and most people are competitive, and they're not going to want to be at the bottom. They're going to, and if you rack and stack your teams based on the scoring, sometimes you might keep it private.
Yeah.
Every company's culture will be different, but I think the key would be as you're going through this, every one of these gives you an opportunity to do what? Coach. And when you do, don't make the coaching one way. Constantly check in. What do you think? Does this make sense? What are your thoughts? What is your opinion? What do you see as ways to improve? I don't care how we get them involved. We want to get them involved.
Yeah. And the scorecard it's going to expose if people buy in or they don't. I mean, it's just plain and simple.
No, totally agree. Then this idea of like, where are they in terms of their development? So we talk about exposure, understanding, skills, expertise. I kind of like this one too, because we want people who sell to have it sound like it's a normal conversation. Kind of like, if you look at the bottom here, where someone is unconsciously, they're not thinking too much, but they're highly competent. So they can get through the process in a way where it doesn't require a lot of thought or awkwardness. And yet it sounds like a normal conversation, but they're really nailing it. They're listening and uncovering and confirming needs. They're presenting, aligning benefits against those needs, handling objections. It just sounds like a normal conversation. Now, it takes a while to get there, because usually if you go to the top, most people don't know they can't listen really well, or they don't present with poise. They don't handle objections. Most people don't know. So they're unconsciously incompetent. And the problem is when we start to coach, we're going to immediately expose people to the fact that, hey, there are some competency issues here. And so then they become consciously aware that they're not unbelievably capable. With some practice, they can start to move to conscious. But I think it's important to point out, and we say this, Jim, at every one of our seminars, it is not fun to be in the conscious, competent stage. When you have to think about something to be competent, it's awkward. It looks like you're thinking. So it's like, oh, what do I do next? What do I do next? No one wants to be there. So as a manager and as a coach, we got to get our people through this. And it's going to be 4 or 5 times to practice through the role plays. And then maybe no one is ever completely unconsciously competent, but we can move people past. Like Jim, like I look at the three of us. If I put you in a position, here's a T chart, Jim, here's a T chart, Sean. The need of the customer is more sales. What would that sales pitch sound like? I guarantee you the three of us, you two, could grab some of those features, bridge it to the benefit. The first time you did it, it would probably look very poised, very confident. You might be critical. You might go, geez, I had to think and it wasn't perfect to me. Yeah, maybe it wasn't perfect, but to all of us, we're going to go, that was pretty good. Now, if you did it a second time, it probably would even be better. But we know what happens with most role plays. You know, you think about a sales meeting, and why do people not do it? Because
It's uncomfortable.
it's uncomfortable, and it's awkward. And so at that point, you know, it's a
But I
situation.
tell you what, you
Yeah.
always feel better after doing it.
Yeah.
I
It
would
reminds
agree
me of
with that.
altar serving when I was a kid at
Really?
church. The last thing I wanted to do was be up on stage during mass. And then you always feel better about doing it. And it's almost like working out or something like that. Like there's always kind of like this dread or fear of like you don't want to do it, but then the second you do, you feel a million times better after. And those role plays, even if you practice something 2 or 3 times, it's almost like, you know, if you have to give a speech or a presentation, if you're not practicing, you know, think about like if you speak at a wedding or something like that.
Yeah.
The second, third, fourth, 15th time you practice something, you start to get into habits. You start to know, okay, when I get to this point, I'm going to say this, or when I get here, I'm going to ask that. It just role playing, as uncomfortable and awkward as it may be, you'd rather screw up and mess up internally by ourselves with our own team than screw up out there.
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
They say
all right.
practice makes perfect.
We're not going to do this poll, but I did think it was important to at least have this conversation. We are observing one of our salespeople sell. They are not doing a good job of listening, and yet they make an important sale. Do we A, celebrate the sale, not coach it? They're going to make the mistake later. We'll coach it then. Or B, celebrate the sale and still coach. Now, in my mind, there is no right or wrong answer to this. I think some people would say B. I don't
B.
have. You would be B?
I'm in B.
I would be.
Well, I'm in B, but I think I would do it as in like, hey, great job. You know, how did you think that went? And if they just said, hey, I made the sale, I probably at that point would pivot to be like, hey, yeah, you did great. Let's move to the next. But if they were at all willing to like reflect or self-assess, I'd be like, hey, you know what? I caught that same thing. In this instance, it didn't trip us up. But if we make sure that we do something differently or figure out the right way to do that next time, either, you know, merchandising, point of sale, handling an objection, following up, executing, to make sure that that mistake didn't happen at the next call, because that might actually cost us a sale.
Yeah. I think it depends on the situation. That sometimes you can, because I mean, if you look at it that they're going to make a mistake again, most likely you can use that opportunity then to coach it. So you can even reflect back on, you know, actually, do you remember you did that same thing and it didn't really hurt you? But in this case, you know, what was that pass that JJ McCarthy threw against?
Yeah.
All the way across the field? Any coach is going to say, do not make that throw. And yet he completed it and scored a touchdown.
No.
Yes, exactly.
And it worked out this time, but that might burn you next time.
Yeah.
Oh, it would absolutely burn them.
More often it's going to burn you.
Yeah.
Really.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's a key. I think the key would be don't overcoach. So if you felt like you needed to coach that one, yes, I think you got to celebrate the sale either way. But I kind of in the camp of A. If you're working 10 stops and early in the day they show like a lack of solid listening, they're going to show that the next stop, but might be a little more. I know that I've had times where it's like we did something pretty important and you just took away all of the feel good, you know, which can be could be a little morale killer. I think this is something everyone's got to think through personally and figure out the best move for them. But I would caution you, don't overcoach.
Yeah, I've done B. And
yeah, I think we all have. We all have. All right, so let's do one quick little role play. And Jim, I want you to coach. Sean, I want you to be the salesperson. I will be the retailer. So after the call is over, Jim, Sean, I want you to make one whopper mistake. And before Jim coaches, I'm going to want everyone to, and you can sell Fox Seltzer, Sean, and just make up some features and benefits, whatever. So Sean, I'm going to want you to make one whopper mistake on the selling process. And Jim, when you go through the RISE coaching process after, I want you to make one whopper mistake, and we'll stop and before or as you're coaching, we'll kind of confirm what Sean screwed up. And then after we'll do a little debrief and we'll see if Sean and I can come up with what you would have missed on the RISE process.
Sure.
So
I'm the sales rep.
Yeah. So for all of the people watching in archive, I want you to do one thing. Observe Sean's selling effort, identify the one thing he missed. So these are the 9 steps. And then when Jim coaches, we're going to see if we can come up with what Jim, and this will be good development. So Sean, whenever you're ready.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, how are things? How's business?
This is pretty slow.
Slow, what do you mean?
Well, we're just not making enough money.
Not making enough money because people aren't coming in the door?
Well, it's not, I mean, yeah, that's part of it. We're just got to make more money.
All right, so you're looking for more sales and more foot traffic. If you have a couple minutes, I can walk you through this new Fox Seltzer and kind of the new RTDs we're coming out with leading into the fall.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me hear it.
Yeah, so Fox Seltzer, as you know, we've got the number 4 IPA in the Midwest. So we've got a lot of brand recognition. So people are going to be already looking for our products. But again, this new innovation, it's going to be exciting. We've got a big social media push coming out. Some cool social media influencers that are really going to, I think, bring in some of those millennial customers that, maybe shopping at some of the bigger grocery stores, but we could kind of get them hopefully to come into your outlet, in the same little mini mall here. But, I think because they know us, because it's new innovation, because there's going to be a big social media push, it's going to bring more people in. We can set up a nice little display. I saw that there's an opportunity. You've got a display that's only got like 3 or 4 cases left. So when that runs out, by the time our delivery comes in on Friday, we can take over that space, set up some really cool point of sale and like a little 20-25 case display that really we think can help bring some of the traffic back that you're looking for and ultimately increase your sales. How does that sound?
It sounds good. I might be interested maybe like over the holidays. Right now, I've just got too many seltzers and I'm trying to actually deplete a few of them. So why don't you come back like in November and we'll talk about it then.
I can understand that you've got a lot of seltzers right now, but again, this one's new. I think people are going to be looking for it. Again, they're going to see it on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're also going to have some ads during some of the NFL games coming out of the next 2 weeks. So I think it'll be a big miss if we don't bring this in.
No, you did say it was the number 4 seltzer IPA, which I've never really heard of that. So
we've got the number 4 IPA.
I got to take it. Bring it in, Shawnee. I'll take it. You wore me down.
All right. Perfect.
Nice job. All right, Coach.
Hey, Sean, how'd you think that went?
I think it went pretty good. I mean, ultimately, I made the sale. I uncovered his need, I thought. I think I went through features and benefits and tied it back to him trying to bring in more people, him trying to increase sales. I acknowledged his objection. So I personally, I thought it went pretty well.
Well, you made the sale, and I think that's fantastic. I mean, great job, especially considering the fact that initially he objected to it, but you were able to wear him down, as he said. I want to go back to the customer's need. What was his need?
His need was more sales. He just said things are slow.
Yeah, and did you confirm that was his need? You remember what you said?
Actually, now that you say that, I don't think I did.
Yeah. Do you remember what you said?
I think he said that things were slow, and I said, okay, so you're looking to bring in more traffic and more sales.
Yeah.
But I think I almost, actually, now that you say that, I think I kind of filled in the blank form.
Yeah. What do we call it? Fishing?
Yeah, I think I probably multiple choice and fishing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so if you were going to confirm the need after you've uncovered it, how would that sound? Knowing what you know now, if you're going to,
when you say things are slow, what do you mean by that? And I think when he mentioned, things, I probably could have just kept digging down instead of, thinking I already knew the answer. I think I could have drilled down further.
Yeah. And again, so if I'm Tom and I said, well, you know what, just, I'm looking for more money and more sales.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably filled in the blank form and I should have just continued to drill.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think I truly uncovered his need nor got him to confirm it.
Yeah. Well,
I just kind of picked him and then I ran with it and went right into my pitch.
Yeah, and which I think you did a nice job going through the pitch, because you did a really nice job with the transition. You went right into the pitch. Yeah, so you got the sale, and I think that when we go to the next stop, maybe you just think a little bit more on how you can uncover and confirm. Do you see how that can help the sales moving forward?
I do.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I certainly, yeah, I think I just got a little excited, and I think sometimes when I get nervous, I just go straight to my pitch. So I think I need to be a little bit more calm and poised at the next stop and trying to work on that moving forward.
Yeah, I think it would sound something more along the lines of, hey, Tom, when you say that you're looking for more money and sales, what exactly do you mean? And if he says, well, it gives you whatever the answer is. If it sounds like something that is Sprite, then you can say, great, I understand you're looking for more traffic. Is that correct? And then you confirm it, and then you proceed into the sale. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right, so Sean, I'm gonna just be the observer here. You obviously didn't confirm. Jim coached you on that. That was your big miss. You actually also didn't focus back on the customer's need too, but we aren't going to overcoach. And Jim, if I look at this little matrix here, it looks like you didn't do S. You did S. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
So again, I thought you did a nice job coaching, but that would have been even better to say, okay, Sean, what would you do differently? So nice job. You guys win the Academy Award.
Well, it's interesting because just prior to, we were looking at that poll that we didn't launch about A or B. What would you do? Celebrate, right, and go. And I was torn between celebrate because of the role play. Between celebrate.
They've been a pretty bad role play if you just said, yeah, great job, Sean. You're right. Let's go to the next
one. And privately, yeah, make sure you tell me.
So nice job, Sean. Nice job improvising. You had to do that on the fly. I didn't give you guys would agree, I didn't give you any prep time. You had no idea what your role was going to be. And Jim, good coach, good coaching. I told you. I told you guys would be great. I love it. So I may need you to do the close here, Jim. All right. So I think today was great. I really appreciate Jim and Sean, your contribution. I hope that people watch this and people will take away the need to live in quadrant 2, whether they're using e-learning modules, these live training. I think really important, the scorecard and doing the on-the-job training. Just any focus on development is going to help people get better, be more successful, have better job satisfaction, the whole Any final comments, Sean?
No, I think this is almost a great training opportunity for me today, as I'm going to be doing some work with, as I mentioned, over the next couple of weeks. But, I think just at its core, the biggest takeaway I have from a coaching standpoint and developing people is having the confidence and vulnerability, almost to a certain extent, to allow people to self-assess. When I was managing 20 or so inside sales reps, my coaching style was one of love and care, but also move out of the way and let me show you how to do it, thinking that was a way to help develop, as in, hey, I've had success in your role specifically. Now that's why I've been, given the manager opportunity to help all of you develop and drive results. But if for there were certain times where if the person was fumbling or not sure how to respond or even on the phone, that I would kick them out of the way to make the sale for the company and try to do it myself, knowing that, hey, it was going to help their quota because that's their account. But I think I was stunting their growth because I wasn't allowing them to grow because I was showing them how I would do it myself and often took over.
Yeah, that makes sense. Feed a man a fish, he eats for a day.
Yeah.
Something like that. Jim, any comments?
Yeah, one, I think, I love hearing Sean's take on things coming from a different perspective. He has been around long enough to understand what it is that we're doing, but the way he can tie back to his previous experience, I think is great, and recognize that there are things that he could learn here. And I think it's the same thing. I mean, I've told this before. There has not been one of these that's gone by where I haven't learned something myself, and I've been working with you for 10 years. So I always like the developmental piece of what we do. I think it's the most rewarding and from job satisfaction. Rob said it right at the top. You know, the satisfaction you get out of helping somebody develop is great. It's like, you know, you feel better about giving a gift than you do receiving one, depending on the gift.
Well said. Good stuff, everybody. Listen, thank you for joining in. Always give us feedback. Let us know what you like, what you'd like to see improved or edited or changed. Love to hear success stories. So we look forward to the feedback, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Or
We'll get into our next topic on sales coaching and leadership. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Sean. And we'll see you all later on.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Bye-bye.